All right, so this is an Entrecomp Europe webinar. Welcome again. Today our webinar is entitled From Experimental Approaches Teaching Entrepreneurial Skills to an Integral Approach Based on Entrecomp. And our key speaker is Philip Bergelman from the Thomas More University in Belgium. Hi, Philip. And I will introduce you a little bit more a bit later. More specifically today, behind the scenes of this webinar are the Service Public de Wallonie in Belgium, Cámara de Comercio de España, the Turkish Erasmus Plus National Agency, Junta de Extremadura in Spain, and ourselves from Bantani. And Entrecomp Europe is, of course, funded by the COSME program of the EU. So Entrecomp Europe, well, most of you might have heard of us so far already, but we're basically building knowledge, building capacity around the Entrecomp model, but mostly around the Entrecomp competences. And that we're doing in various areas of education, non-formal education, training, youth work, but also employability initiatives. And today this webinar comes at the crossroads of all of these, actually. By now, I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with the model of Entrecomp, the framework. We have our flower here on the screen. So the 3 areas, the 15 competences, this is what brings us here, or partly what brings us here today. So as I was saying, with the Entrecomp Europe project, we are building these communities of practice in 5 countries, which are Belgium, Spain, Italy, Turkey, and Moldova. So this is my opportunity to tell you to join in if you're based in one of these countries. In the chat, you'll have the links towards our website, towards our Facebook groups and our LinkedIn. And of course, if you'd like to create your own national community around Entrecomp, please let us know, and we'd love to help you to do that. And actually, the way we can help you do that is because in parallel of all of our work in the countries, we're also, of course, trying to create a global community around Entrecomp. And what's coming up soon is our Entrecomp.com platform, which is going to be your one-stop shop to learn, do online training, network with other organizations, maybe meet potential partners for projects, disseminate about your training and your work. So I want to call you now to maybe go on Entrecomp.com and pre-register to our platform so that you're the first ones to have access to it when it comes live very, very soon. It will be in the chat, and I will remind you at the end of the meeting, of course, but that's quite exciting. So today, right after, I will give the floor to Raquel from Cámara de Comercio de España and to Annabelle Favreau from Junta de Extremadura, who will tell you a bit more about the work we've done so far in the areas of formal education, youth work, and employability within our projects. And then we'll give the floor to Philip, but I will introduce Philip a little bit more later on. And then we'll go into a Q&A, but again, do not hesitate to put your questions in the chat at any moment. Yeah, so I will straight away give the floor to you, Raquel.
I'm Raquel from the Spain Chamber of Commerce, and I'm going to present a little bit and briefly the practice pillar 2, the employment and enterprise practice pillar. The practice pillar 2 is focused on employability and enterprise, and whose objective is the development and implementation of learning opportunities based on the layer of the learning outcomes of Entrecomp. This practice pillar, as you can see, is made up of 5 partners, the Spain Chamber and SPVER as the leaders of the practice pillar, and also are part of the practice pillar, the Chamber of Commerce of Moldova, the Chamber of Commerce of Basilicata, and the Union of Chambers of Commodity Exchanges of Turkey. Also, in this table, you could see the tasks that has been assigned to the practice pillars, such as open spaces, online seminars, transnational insights collection, recommendation, and the development of some tools and materials, and also we will develop a pilot. We will carry out a pilot with the LoopMe tool. So far, the practice pillar 2 has held 6 open spaces, 7 with this one, in which we have shared a common understanding of Entrecom among the partners of the practice pillar on the one side, and the other side we have the open space has been useful to exchange case studies, sharing practices that can be linked with Entrecom. Throughout this year, the open spaces are more focused on how Entrecom has been implemented so far. And we have also to complete the task that we have been assigned with transnational insights, recommendations, and 3 more open spaces and 1 transnational seminar that SPV-EER should hold during the rest of the year. As you can see, as I said, we have to develop 3 more open spaces and recommendations to carry out an optimal application of Entrecom in the countries that are part from our project. And that's all. I think it's everything regarding the practice pillar 2 and the activities that we have implemented so far.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you. As you can see, we've not been idle in the Entrecom Europe project. Annabelle, did you want to tell us a little bit more about what we've done in the other area of our work?
Yes, thank you, Alexandra. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for giving me the floor. I will just mention a few things done under the practice pillar 1, which is dedicated to education, formal and non-formal education and youth. We've been focusing on teacher training. We have also showed some assessment tools to measure impact in entrepreneurship education programs. We have also been organizing the Entrecom playbook presentation that was developed by the European Commission. The idea is to look or to show practices that link this formal and non-formal education. And this practice pillar is dedicated to any trainer that works with entrepreneurship education or want to develop entrepreneurship skills. This is also informal education, but also with young people. And one of the next activity that we plan to organize is like a workshop on tools to work with young people to develop entrepreneurship skills. And I encourage you to register in the Entrecom platform to keep posted with all the news. And also there is, I think that my colleagues will share the link for the news on our Entrecom website. If you have any practice or any project that deals with entrepreneurship education, informal and non-formal education, please get in touch with us, because we are very interested in hearing from you. Thank you, and very interested in hearing from Philip. Experience.
Thank you, Annabelle. Yes, indeed. If you have any projects you want to share with us, you'd like to share your experience, please get in touch. We really want to give you the floor as well. I'm now going to introduce our speaker, Philip Burgelman. So Philip, you've been working in education for 21 years now. You originally trained as an architect, and then you discovered the passion for building educational programs rather than buildings. That's interesting. I'm looking forward to your story. So Philip designs learning tracks on entrepreneurial competences, but also virtual mobility, lifelong learning, and future employability skills and the SDGs. So really, really interesting, really important topics. But today you will tell us more about the journey you've had with entrepreneurship as a key competence and with the model of Entrecomp itself. And I think you will share with us your practical approach and also what you've developed within Thomas More in terms of bachelor courses. And maybe at the end, I will ask you a little bit more about taking a step back and looking at the Flemish model around entrepreneurship education. The floor is yours, Philip.
Okay, thank you. I will first try to share my screen in a proper way, which normally should be by now. You should see
yes.
My first page, and here in the bottom, I'm going to use this wonderful magical thing, which is a laser pointer, so
it's working.
Actually follow. Okay, fantastic. Well, yes, welcome everybody, and thank you for inviting me, the partnership of Entrecomp Europe, for to share my experience and my story. As you already mentioned a little bit, Alexandra, it has been a journey so far, which started like 10 years ago, when I was working as a lecturer in a design department of our higher education. Because I'm trained as an architect originally, indeed, to build things. But yeah, some 10 years ago, something came into my mind, or into my view, let's say, that I thought the architecture of professional bachelor education wasn't very much connected to the possibilities of future professional world. And so gradually I started to do some research amongst the possibilities and the reasons or the concepts that some better connection or some better connection for these students towards all the possibilities that they could have after graduation should be. And then 10 years later, now I am entrepreneurship education architect. So together with colleagues, I really built customized specific trajectories through our university college, not in a whole college. It's a big school. We have 22,000 students, 2,000 staff members. So it takes time to implement new things. But it's going in the good direction. It's also going gradually. And for my personal activities this academical year, I'm actually mentoring or coordinating 5 tracks where entrepreneurship stands central, which you can read in the bottom, which are different, which is a good thing. It's about logistics, but also big data. It's about design. It's about interior architecture. And that makes it interesting for me to see how one system could serve multiple thinking frames. One part is very creative, the other part is very analytical, the other part has to do with ICT, but still I noticed that Entrecomp is usable in all these tracks. So, but things started somewhere, and as I said, it was a specific moment 10 years ago when I was wondering how it was possible that some very, very talented students who were creating these incredible new design and industrial products didn't do more than just creating an end of study product where they had some graduation or some scores for. So, and this is like a real actual conversation that we had, asking them why don't you consider doing something for yourself after this graduation? And it was clear that at that moment entrepreneurship was at the very, very, very beginning of being in the debates and the discussions amongst us as teachers, also management. And I decided to do something with that. I immediately became snapped by this virus. Sorry for the word. So to see how yeah, higher education and entrepreneurial competences could join in some way or another. So I did some, in the first years between 2011 and 2014, I did some self-paced research. I did some study visits amongst with colleagues in throughout Europe. I read a lot. I talked a lot with people who were already busy doing things in entrepreneurship education. And then at a certain moment, a colleague who was the course leader for data management, he asked me, hey, Philip, I know that you're doing things with entrepreneurship, and I think it's important that our students, you know, data is an ICT, very analytical, very technical course, but the world of work around us asks more and more for graduates who know more than just this one skill in ICT. They need to be innovative. They need to come up with creative new ideas. In short, they need to be more entrepreneurial. Do you want to do something? I said, okay, but there's nothing that I have. You know, I don't have any course ready or something. So you'll have to trust me to do some trial and error work and just start with it. So, yeah, it's okay, no problem. You can do it. So I was thankful for that, and I decided to see what is it that the students themselves at that moment would see as being or receiving in terms of entrepreneurship competences. And the picture that you see here is like a mind map that we built together in class. And I was surprised that the students said more than the usual suspected things, asking them what is needed to become entrepreneurial or an entrepreneur. And they said, well, obviously you need money to do stuff like an entrepreneur. They talked about growth. They talked about sources, and again, they talked about money, but also they mentioned things that I wasn't expecting from them, like vision, and you need to be initiative, to take initiative, you need to dare. The words that you see here are Dutch words, of course, because I work in Antwerp, in the province of Flanders. So I've put some translations here. You need to be perseverant. You need to be able to collaborate. You need to be or to have persuasiveness. So I was quite surprised that the students themselves mentioned not only the hard skills of being an entrepreneur, but also the soft skills or the transversal skills that are needed to undertake action. So I said, okay, that's a good thing. Let's continue. And the experimental phase was the 2 years between 2014 and 2016 that I used the students as my laboratory rabbits, as a matter of speaking, to try to build comprehensive learning activities and exercises, but still at the same time some let's say some covering ideology or some personal framework was building or I was building it. And at a certain moment I said, okay, if what the purpose of entrepreneurship education should be this, because at those days I remember I had very heavy discussions with my colleagues and management, saying, hey, listen, I think we should start with entrepreneurship tracks. And I think it's something that most of us recognize. Most of our colleagues, and specifically management, said, yes, of course we'll do, but the main goal is to create more businesses, more entrepreneurs, final. Do you have an idea how many entrepreneurs you can create doing this type of education? And I said, well, I don't think it will be a lot. You know, at those days, I remember research figures that said, well, if you do something robust or powerful in terms of entrepreneurship education, if you have like a group of 100 and 10 of them finally start up a business, then you can be very lucky. But I said, but it's not about those 10 entrepreneurs that we have to do this. It's for all the students. So from those days, I said, if we create entrepreneurship education, it has to be for everybody, because I strongly believe that this triangle definitions that are here is the reason why entrepreneurship education should be there, because it can actually lead to real business entrepreneurship, starting of new businesses, but it also has to do with intrapreneurship. It's about behavior, it's about entrepreneurial attitudes. And also it can be, or it can result into social entrepreneurship. So for me, that was like this overall value pattern of enterprising individuals that yeah, must be the hallmark of impactful entrepreneurship education. And so I use this slogan and which this slogan I entered every door of all management level at school, saying that I believe that it's not important. Well, it is important that students eventually become an entrepreneur, but it's even more important that every student, and I mean every 22,000 into Thomas More, becomes more entrepreneurial. And I think using a framework like Entrecomp gives a lot of possibilities to do so. So, well, that's in like 10 minutes, my own self-paced trial and error experimental journey from the last 10 years. So at this moment, and I will share with you a very concrete teaching practice from one particular course. It's a mandatory track in first year Bachelor in Information Management. It's about big data and privacy in our business school. And it's called entrepreneurship. From the beginning, well, I have to go back 2 slides because when I was at this point, I realized at a certain moment I had this whole scattered, scaffolded series of sets of learning activities and exercises that I did, developing these exercises and learning activities on an ongoing list of competences that I defined. But I realized at a certain moment I need some framework to have some structure. And then in 2016, Entrecomp was published. And I recognized, okay, there's my framework. I have it. That's what I'm going to use. I mean, the work was done for me, as a matter of speaking, because I was doing a little bit the same thing that what Entrecomp did. I was thinking about, okay, it's about creativity. Obviously, for me, it was the most simple set of competences to think about because I'm trained in creativity. But still, I found it not so easy to actually develop or describe learning outcomes, for example, for different levels also of creativity that one should have. Because remember, I want entrepreneurship education as something that every student from an institute reaches. So you need also different levels of complexity or of ability or progress. So I was working on this, and then suddenly, boom, the Entrecomp framework was there, and I said, okay, that's cool. I'm going to use this. And so I really, almost very literally, used it because you can recognize the bar on the top of my presentation. It's a fixed graphic stamp, let's say, of all my courses that I do, who directly refer to the structure of Entrecomp, as you can recognize, ideas and opportunity, resources into action. And even I was lucky. Well, or it's a coincidence that the 3 big competence clusters subdivided into 5 subclusters counts for 15 competences, which more or less corresponds with like a common track for these courses in our school. It's like 1 semester. It's more or less 12 to 13 weeks. So I can experience and explore 1 competence a week within every training session of more or less 2 or 3 hours with a group of students. And so I decided just very, very explicitly follow the structure of Entrecomp itself. And but of course, imagine being a first-year student, 18 years old, in a course like data or whatever type of course, and then having this teacher in front of him saying, okay, guys, we're going to explore and I'm going to learn you to spot opportunities. For most of the students, it's something very abstract, very strange, like spotting what. So I had to think about a way in which the entrepreneurial competences and actually the fact that they're actually doing some kind of entrepreneurial action with a purpose, I had to find something which could join both trajectories together. So this is what the students have to do. They have to undertake entrepreneurial action, and so they have to prove me. And if you read the first paragraph, it's the definition that is used with Entrecomp. Able to detect a need or to spot an opportunity for innovation, able to create multiple novel ideas which leads to a solution for this need or opportunity, able to create added value with a solution for a target group, and able to communicate your solution with the world. You know, So it's almost literally the definition which is used in Entrecomp. And by realizing a self-selected innovation project that you develop from idea to I call it a minimum lovable concept. It's not like a minimum viable project, because for 18 years old, it's already a little bit too far or too difficult, but something that they make me love it as a teacher, to say like, wow, this is an incredible good idea or a good innovation, but it's also a minimum lovable concept that they love themselves to work on it for 12 or 13 weeks. And that you present this using a promotional 1-minute video. So they have to build this idea, this concept, by also implementing and experiencing, exploring all the 15 competences from the Entrecomp framework on a foundational level. And then finally create this promotional 1-minute video. And their active participation to the online sessions, of course, from the last year, where they have multiple group assignments. They have to make a lot of home assignments. They all have to cluster this in this entrepreneurship portfolio, and both stand for 15% of the score. There's no exam. This is a course which I evaluate on the basis of permanent evaluation. And then I tell them, look, this is, I think, being entrepreneurial, it's a step-by-step learning journey, but it's not something that goes in one straight line. It's a road that follows this trajectory. It goes up and back again, etc. And the mere fact that something that I tell them throughout the whole course is that they have to iterate again and again and again on every step that they do, that it's not when finding like this first opportunity that they have this idea of, okay, I found the big idea, I'm going to continue this, and then this teacher says, no, it's not a good idea, you have to start all over again. Well, that this mere fact works as an attitude, being perseverant, for example, or seeing the added value of iterations, of putting yourself in question and your innovation, and etc. etc. And that's why it's symbolized with this strange road. And I will show you some 6 or 7 steps or tools that I use throughout this journey. So what I give them, and you see here that I'm busy building the new version for the next academical year, for 21-22. At the beginning, at the start of the track, I really give them like a real entrepreneurship toolbook. I'm now considering, of course, of making it totally online, although that I see advantages of printing it, because their toolbook, they also use it like a sketchbook, where they put notes in it, where they put little drawings, etc., etc. And it's a different way of developing ideas than just online, but nevertheless, I will see. They get this toolbook, which I told them, being entrepreneurial, it's like a Swiss knife, which is like one box, which is full of tools where you can solve like any kind of problem with it. And then the next page of the book is this, where I explain them this book is like a guideline. It's it bundles the tools that you learn, and you see them on the right there in the entrepreneurship trajectory. It guides you through your learning journey in entrepreneurial competences. So they know from the beginning in the first lesson, this is every step that we are going to take, every competence that we are going to explore. And then I'll go with the weeks going further and further. There's here 16 tools, but sometimes I take 2 or 3 steps or tools per session, sometimes 1. But at the end, normally we end like having explored every competence and tool that is available. So with a little explanation about Entrecomp itself, what is being entrepreneurial. So it's something that I really share with them very, very directly. And then step 1, in the entrepreneurial selfie, it's here in the back. It's a kind of image that they take from themselves using a monitoring tool. And the diagram that you see in the middle, unfortunately, it's in Dutch. But I can tell you that the competences that are measured here are more or less the same or very comparable than those of Entrecomp. I do this test in Dutch because I have to do it in Dutch because we're a Flemish school. So I hope one day that there will be like an Entrecomp assessment tool, online tool available like this, because it gives a very good photo. Like it's a moment picture, let's say, of where a student stands in terms of, in this case, it's 11 competences, and where they can grade themselves. There's an upper level and a lower level. And specifically why I do this is because doing the tests, it has 45 questions, I think. And at the end, it gives an overview of the competences where some student is good at and the other competences where he or she is weak at. And they have to choose 2 of their weakest competences in terms of entrepreneurship and develop a personal development plan in terms of these entrepreneurial competences. And at the end of the trajectory, they have to do a reflection and argue if they see if there's like progress or not in terms of those 2 competences. And it's an interesting way of seeing if your own courses and the trajectory that you do with them have impact. And I think it's quite positive to see that. One of the next steps is kind of a broad exploration of what entrepreneurial or being entrepreneurial could be. And so they have to, throughout the whole trajectory, they have to create 6 files, 6 kind of identity kits, let's say, of people or products or services that inspire them. Just very broadly, who is your entrepreneurial inspiration? In the beginning, in the experimental years, I just asked, like, just put it in a list and we'll see, get some URL links, etc. But I noticed that well, students are young people and still students, so they did something just to be finished with it. And this list was like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Richard Branson. That's it. I said no, that it should be more than just these big famous examples. So I made this exercise a little bit more explicit, and so they have to find someone which is close into their daily living environment. Like it could be an uncle or an aunt or a brother or somebody you know or a neighbor or whatever, who for some reason could be inspirational for them. And at the same time, they really have to argue in 250 words why this person is so inspirational. So they really have to look up what or in which way they see some kind of connection between themselves and the way they think about entrepreneurship and the role model that they choose for. And so it became a very interesting exercise because in below the argumentation box you see 3 more inspirations. That's what, because I tell them that they have to find out or look up 3 more inspirational people or products or services that they collect together as a group. In this case, this group was 40 students big, so they each have to find 6 different entrepreneurial examples. So at the end of the track, we have like this whole catalog of entrepreneurial role models, and it's something that they understand that it's like sort of kind of continuous inspiration to just build some database with inspirational examples. Okay, then one of the most important steps that we take together, or competences that we start with, is of course spotting opportunities. And there again, for a lot of students, it's specifically those who are not trained strangely in creative thinking. It's something very abstract. It's like, search for what? Well, what's an opportunity? What is a need? Okay, when you ask them to find a need, that is something more concrete, but an opportunity, etc., etc. So okay, let's do this together and look at this brief description of what you have to do, but specifically and ask these questions. Be curious. I've met this person that told you something that you said, okay, it's impossible that this situation is going on. So I was surprised that people are having this specific kind of need for something, and it would change the world if I could perhaps find an idea for this. I say, let's go through this step by step, and then thanks to also the very interesting work of an American colleague of ours, Gary Schoeninger, who is leading the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. I'm thankful that I could use his opportunity discovery canvas. Well, let's say I made a Flemish customized version of it, which I translated in English for today, which consists of three documents, 3 A4 documents, where you have like 3 question blocks, which have again 3 sub-questions, where really they have to step by step, it's kind of a dissection of what an opportunity could be. And they really have to follow this step by step and deeply think and rethink and iterate on every step that they do. I take 2 weeks to do this, just the discovery of an opportunity. But I saw that it really helps them. Because most of the 18-year-olds, they think top down, you know, they think like A to B. They think like, what could be an opportunity? Well, my bike gets stolen every day, so I will invent the ultimate bike lock. Final, I'm finished. That's my opportunity. Yeah. So, well, if you start to look and to dive into these questions, and that's why I specifically put this red one here. Describe other solutions that are currently available, do some Google research, and then I find, oh shit, there's already the ultimate bike lock. Okay, well, I have to rethink my opportunity. And that is this process of iteration that they have to go through and through. And at the same time, you'll notice that it's one of the competences that come with being entrepreneurial is being perseverance and not being sad that a teacher says, well, no, it's not a good opportunity that you see, you have to start over again. And be persistent and try to find your own opportunity, which you can take and which you become a little bit addicted to, and then probably there's a big chance that it's a good one. So this first phase, it's like a kind of detection phase of opportunities, and they really have to describe very detailed, because I want them to deeply reflect and think about the usefulness also of some opportunity and describe this. So they have to make a diagnose, and at the end of this first A4, they have to decide after this initial diagnosis, is it worth continuing or not? And then we go to the second one. It's another set of 3 blocks of questions with 3 sub-questions. And there they do some investigation regarding the usefulness of one of the 3. They have to define 3 opportunities. What is the single most important feature of your solution? Describe these key differences compared with other solutions. Describe potential barriers, etc., etc. So they have to think like a detective here to see my opportunity could be solution for, etc., etc., etc. There again, based on this usefulness research, is it still worth to continue? And also there, I start to see that most of the students, if they are correct with themselves, they see like, okay, this was perhaps a good idea to do opportunity A or B, but I decide here it's not a good one. Okay, I take another one. And then after that process, they go to the last documents, block 7, 8, and 9. Again, 3 sub-questions where they have to explore the kind of, well, will a possible solution of my opportunity, will it be of interest for anybody at a certain moment? How will potential stakeholders learn about your solution? How will you get it with some end user or some client or whatever, etc., etc. So they have to find what's the added value of my opportunity, and then finally decide if they would continue or not, making it a minimum lovable product. And so that this is really an intense and intense moment for them at the very beginning of the trajectory. And here you see an example of one student who has done this very, very well, really reflecting and arguing on each detail why yes or no it was he, I think, should continue to develop this opportunity. But I noticed that those students who do this very meticulously, at the end, they decide, okay, it's a go for this innovation. And in a lot of cases, it's really something really useful, like not only for the exercise in a trajectory, but also as a possible continued project afterwards. So that is just on the phases of opportunity discovery. I have to tell you that in the first year, this trajectory is an individual track. It's something that students do on their own. I'm not totally happy with this, but it's strictly pragmatic reason, because in general, I have big groups in first year. Sometimes it's a group of 45 students. I had groups of 110 students, and I'm doing this on my own. So I had to find a way to see how my feedback and their own self-paced self-reflection could join or merge in one way or another. But still, I developed another tool, which is something that the students have to do together. And that is interesting. It's another, well, it can be connected with the competence of mobilizing others to develop your idea or opportunities. And here in groups of 4, they have to discuss in a session of 2 hours there are 3 opportunities that they are thinking about. And I developed this validating opportunities canvas. It's about valuing ideas, where they have to think together about the desirability, feasibility, and scalability of the opportunity that they're working on. And again, here I created 2 fields. They have to argue pro and contra. Why the desirability of, for example, immortality pills. It's an example that I created myself, that I discussed with students to show them like really extreme ideas about something like immortality pills, and other ones which are really more realistic, like for example, tackling trash dumps. So, but it's an example to show them that you can think of any type of idea, how extreme or weird it is. Every idea is worthwhile being dissected, as a matter of speaking, in this way. So they have to think about feasibility also in terms of pro and contra, and the scalability of the 3 opportunities that are listed here. And the other examples that I gave was, for example, something that young people think of it all the way. We should have free Wi-Fi on all public transport. I know in a lot of countries it's already happening, but it's not in Belgium. It's not in Flanders, so it's really something that our students would like to have. And then something which is like a universal challenge is tackling trash dumps. To just show you 3 totally different types of opportunities that students in reality also think about. Because remember, in this first year, I tell them you can choose whatever you want in terms of this opportunity. It doesn't have to connect with the course that you're doing. I think it's even better that you choose something which is very close to your daily habits, daily life, on the way from school to work or whatever. So try to choose that, and that's why we get these types of opportunities. But then you see, after they pitch to each other the pros and the cons in the 3 columns, they have to score together. They have to work like a kind of consumer insights group, let's say. Well, it's very small, of course, but still they have to decide together a type of score, which is listed here in the back, where the individual students know, okay, I was perhaps very engaged to do something with free Wi-Fi on all public transport, but I see now by talking about these 3 columns, during desirability, feasibility, and scalability, that perhaps the idea of tackling trash dumps is something that serves more people and has more added value than the free Wi-Fi on all public transport. But it's something that they have to decide fully for themselves. It's just a way to let them see different viewpoints about their own opportunities. Here see an example. It's in Flemish of how students introduce these assignments. It's one of the assignments. They have in general like 25 to 30 assignments throughout the trajectory of one semester, like these ones, like the opportunity canvases, and a whole range of other assignments that they have to collect in their entrepreneurship portfolio. Voilà. So after the valuing ideas, I'm going to make a big step now to step number 12 is about creating a vision. You have to figure out that between step 4 and 12, it's like an ongoing process of ideation, for example. We have some very intense brainstorming sessions to create a whole range of ideas around the chosen opportunity that they have to develop. I'm also working with personas. I'm also working with mentors. So they have to find a mentor outside school who helps them developing their opportunity to that minimum lovable product. So, and every step has its own tool. But because of the time restrictions for today, I decided to go a big step forward and to step into creating a vision, which was a step connected to the entrepreneurship competences, which was a little bit difficult for me to see or challenging. How can I make a combination or a connection between the fact that not only businesses, or startups create a mission, a statement, and a vision, and they think about their values to actually start up the business. It's something that basically everybody should do. Also, working in a company, it's like having goals. You know, it's like having, yeah. What is your goal for the future? And so I decided to match their own profile, their own identity, with something that will happen in the far future, like in 2040, and to tell them, what if you see yourself as a company, or as a set of skills, as a set of expertise, as a set of competences in 20 years, and what do you want to see of yourself in 20 years? How do you see yourself as a company that offers his or hers expertise and skills, etc. In not only in the professional world, but in the world in general. So that's why they have to create via a mind map a vision of themselves, but based on the ingredients that startups and companies do, thinking about a mission statement, a vision, values, etc., etc. So I take them into this story to see, okay, what is the reason future employers, for example, will come to you in 20 years? What do you want? What do you want to offer in 20 years? How will you have been developed yourself? What are your assets with which you will put yourself in the market? How does your dream professional reality in 2040 looks like? And then they have to think about parameters for this. Well, let's say we go out from the idea that you want to be successful. So what are the parameters for you to be successful in 2040? What will give you satisfaction? And then it becomes very difficult for them, because for the beginning, for them 18 years old to think 20 years ahead, it's very, very challenging. I think it's for everybody. But for them, it's like, oh my God, never thought like six months ahead, like the next holiday or something. And you ask me to think like in 20 years, oh my God. And then on top of that, I want them to think about parameters that can be anything except material parameters. And it's not like, oh, I want to have a big car, big house, being rich, etc. No. It really has to be parameters for you to define yourself as being successful in 20 years. That strictly has to do with skills. And that is incredible, challenging and confronting exercises for them to do. But anyway, so what's your call? And then unfortunately, it's also in Flemish that you see here, but here it's a work from one student that made this mind map, and he told me he worked 3 weeks on it during this iterative process. Like, okay, I think perhaps this will be my future. It's not so good. If I combine it with another passion that I have, it will probably be something else. So, but finally at the end, they said like, okay, thank you, sir, for making us doing this task, because it's the first time that we look into the future, that we develop or create some vision for ourselves in order to what we want to be in 20 years. I say, okay, that's good, because that is exactly what businesses, startups, and everybody should do. So that is the exercise that I created around the competences of creating vision. Here you see other examples of how they build up these mind maps. I they have total freedom to be as creative as they want. So it's just to show you some examples. But after this vision of yourself, I make it even a little bit more challenging to go with step 13 about motivation and perseverance. And I tell them, well, okay, you created this mind map now, and you all created like a clear vision of the future. But what? Imagine that these things doesn't work how you see them at this moment. Did you already thought about a kind of a plan B? Because I can tell you that I have 25 years more experience in life than you, and I can really you can count on it that it will never work as you planned. So what could be your plan B? Do you have like already now an idea of what an alternative professional life, and even two alternative professional lives could be, because you will need this motivation and perseverance to continue doing so. So I have this next exercise, which is connected with the 2040 mind map. They have to mind map their possible professional life B, your plan B, in 20 years. So they have to think right now, already right now, what are the other competencies or talents and passions and interests that they have, next to the fact that they're at this moment, for example, following one course here for this group was information management. And then you have these very remarkable results as students say, okay, in the case that it wouldn't work professionally for me as an IT specialist or something, well, perhaps I will become a writer or a psychiatrist or a journalist, a health worker, policeman, something with creativity, something with chemistry, etc., etc. So that also is quite confronting for them, seeing this teacher who questions the study that they're doing by doing this exercise, telling them, well, imagine that it will work out differently. So what is your plan at this moment, and do some iterations on it to see if you have like some possible alternatives. So it's a way to deal with this, well, for them sometimes kind of abstract and theoretical competence that has to do with perseverance. So this makes it more or less tangible. So that was a quick run through some of the steps and tools that I use. So at the end of the track, I review with them the whole track, and I invite you, remember that for this group, I asked them at the end of this double learning track, entrepreneurship competences and innovation opportunities, to create ultimately a movie of 1 minute where they show, and they have like total creative freedom to make a movie of 1 minute. It can be like an animated video, or it can be like a TikTok kind of video where they show what they did. So now I hope that is my screen still sharing on YouTube at this moment.
For now, we're still on your presentation.
Sorry.
No
Then I'm going back. Then I have to stop sharing this. Go there. Where is it? Just a minute. I really want to show you this because it's really good.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yes.
Do you hear the music?
Yes.
So this is a student from that track in information management who said, "Listen, professor, I know how to draw things. Is it okay that I draw?" I said, "Yeah, of course. If you're able to do so, please use your talent to explain me in this animated drawing video what your plan is." Well, of course, unfortunately, the text below is in Dutch, but it's an idea of, well, it's a kind of a vintage kind of idea of recycling and reusing clothes, swap friends, swapping things. So voila. So these videos are, for me, they were an interesting alternative instead of the classical pitches, which firstly take a lot of time, But secondly, for me, having these videos is something interesting because I can continuously use and go back to the videos again and again. So now you're back in my presentation, is that correct?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I see again in the beginning, so...
Hola, mis queridos amigos. Me
Oops,
alegro de verlos a todos hoy en esta reunión de Zoom. Creo que
this wasn't...
ya podemos empezar.
Do we have
Sorry?
yeah, I think it's fine now. Yeah.
Me gustaría presentar
Or maybe
So-
someone has to mute their mic.
No, it was a YouTube video that
All right.
continued playing, so
All right.
don't worry.
No problem.
Are you still in my PowerPoint now? Can you
Yep.
still see it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I was at the good part. So this is like an end result of this 12 to 13 weeks trajectory. But now, because the title of my presentation was about an integral approach, and the integral also counts for because the example that I show you is first year track on foundation level, following the Entrecomp progression model. I'm lucky to have in this one particular course the possibility to have the same group of students in the second year. So where I go two complexity or progression levels higher in another track, which is called Innovation Lab. I also developed this toolbook where you see the examples here. Here it's still in Dutch, but you see more or less the same graphic and setup of the explanation. What are you going to do? And of course, you can probably recognize in the text Lean Startup, like an overall level of complexity that I'm adding is that instead of an individual track, it becomes a team track. So that's as such working together, collaborating together within an entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial development track becomes the main dimension of complexity, together with the fact that it's not an open innovation, minimal lovable product that they have to develop. They get an assignment from an external party. But we do the same trajectory. And well, I think the most of the work that I do within Thomas More and working in the different tracks is framed here, because as I said, I quite literally follow also the progression levels, foundation, intermediate, advanced, etc., with the 3 years, the 3 phases that a typical bachelor course has in Flanders. It's 3 years. And I'm lucky at this moment to have like two groups, which I follow in the first year. It's individual learning within one discipline, and it's about open innovation. I have that same group in the second year, where it becomes team learning, still within one discipline, but with an assignment given by an external party. So it's an extra complexity added on. And then at this moment, I'm also teaching in a third year, but it's a different group of students. It's something that I have to fight for within school to create these comprehensive lines from a first, second to third year within the same group or course. But I have one group where I have the possibility to work interdisciplinary. So 2 or 3 groups of students are mixed together. For example, business, design, and technology. And they have to complementary on the same basis work together on also an assignment given by an external party. But still, every phase has its own more or less the same entrepreneurship Entrecomp toolbook as the one I showed you some examples from, and also Innovation Lab toolbook where I show you the cover, and then the interdisciplinary lab toolbook, which is also something that I work on constantly. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I don't know how much time I exceeded. It's okay, I think.
All fine. Yeah, it's all fine.
Sorry?
It's all fine.
Okay. So to conclude, if you go back to the first year students, but it also counts for the second year and even the third year students. I asked them things at the beginning of the track. Remember, first year students, they have these 2 weak competences that they have to develop following this selfie, this monitoring tool. And at the end of the track, they have to reflect on if yes or no something happens, something hopefully positively changed regarding those competences. And next to that, I have like a whole questionnaire of things that I asked them, reflecting on what they've learned. And I just grabbed some quotes here of things that students say. In general, they're like quite happy to do this. And well, yeah, so I'm also happy with that they see the added value for them to at least having had this one quite intense and powerful entrepreneurial learning experience, because they really have to do a lot of things. It's not that they have to study for an exam and build up knowledge or something. It's really like very, very, very actively. And then, yeah, you have these effects that happen, which you can read here. Like students saying, okay, I can certainly see myself doing something in the future that I invented myself. So it's a different way of selling. Yeah, it became of point of interest, perhaps starting my own business, but I'll see what the future brings me. This module encourages you to test your self-knowledge and what you are inspired at. It shows you who you want to become and how hard you want to put effort into achieving things. So that also, for me, gives like a kind of overall view that I think doing it this way, and thanks to the Entrecomp framework, which is not something that only leads to new businesses, but it's like, yeah, finding value in the things that you want to do in your future life, etc., adding or creating value for other people, really is really helpful. So that was my my story. I have one little thing to end. That's for the post track, let's say, that I also have a dream. I have a dream. And I have the platform here of how many people are we here? Like 50, 60 people. 61. So if you want to join my dream, well, please contact me, and you have all my contact information there, because can you believe that thanks to Corona, I understood that I think, or I saw that creating a self-paced online learning module with Entrecomp in the form of a MOOC, for example, massive open online course, is perfectly possible, because of Corona. Because normally outside Corona period, we are working together in working classes with big tables, and we're building prototypes, etc., etc. But here we had to do everything online, and I didn't saw any major differences with the learning results of students. So with my I'm persuaded that having or learning or experiencing at least this one very intense entrepreneurial learning experience must be something that every learner must do. And I'm talking right now for the 22,000 students that we have at Thomas More, but you understand that it's impossible to create the proper group of teachers around such a big group. So I think it's possible to use a MOOC, an online module, to achieve the same results, and that is my dream to build. So he or she who wants to share my dream, well, please be free to contact me. That's it. Thank you, people.
Thank you so much, Philip. Thank you. That was really, really brilliant. Thank you. Right, I think we can start the questions, if that's okay with you, Philip.
Yep, so it's no problem. Absolutely.
All right, so I gathered a few. Please feel free to drop them into the chat while we start. So as you could see, there was quite a few questions and a few comments as well there. I'll start with Andy. So Andy was saying that they recently had an Enterprise Educators UK event entitled Design and Enterprise, which was a marriage made in heaven, apparently. Listening to you, how useful is your design experience in helping you to achieve what you've done? And there was a second question by Andy, so I'll just pop it in now. Do you have to teach the students theory as well? For example, the abduction approach that you are using in visioning.
Well, thank you, Andy, and hi, Andy, for the question. Did my design background help me? Yes, I quite think so, because I've noticed it, because talking with colleagues who do like for example research on learning, etc. They had difficulties to see the translation, or the, how do you say it, to associate specific or concrete learning activities with the theory of how a certain activity in entrepreneurship education should lead to. And I noticed that I didn't had any problem at all to see something happening, you know. So that's one thing. I wasn't afraid also to have these experimental years in the beginning, and to do a lot of trial and error, to see things that don't work at all, without being sad about that. And I think it's a different approach than a lot of colleagues who on beforehand they really describe fully in detail, this is what our students will have to learn, and have this other approach of solving a threshold which appears at certain moments, to also to iterate, you know, on the learning activities that you try to develop. So I really felt like building and designing these things like I was in the past designing buildings, you know, building up and breaking down again and again and again. So it became more like a play for me, or so that certainly helped me. The second question, do I give them some kind of theory? No, absolutely not, because I'm limited in time. The most of the tracks last for 2 hours a week, so it's small. It's a small course still in most of the tracks, but well, like 10 years ago there weren't any. Now more and more tracks start to implement, or courses start to implement entrepreneurship tracks. So no, I have to choose to see what I do with them, and because I really want to use those 2 hours to actively, together with them, explore the real life activities that go with brainstorming, with valuing ideas, with discussing about it, with finding resources. There's a lot of debate going on in the classes, even the big classes in auditoria. So and at the same time, I know that it's important to also create this knowledge pillar. I'm absolutely aware of that, and I even agree with that. But that is something that I try to combine or to connect with courses from other colleagues who do dive deeper into the theory. So I hope one day that we are able to merge both theoretical and more practical tracks that I do, so that both become building blocks and catalysts at the same time. So, but that is the thing that is actually going on.
Thank you, Philip. I hope that answers your questions, Andy, but feel free to pop your questions or your comments. So there was quite a conversation ongoing between Andy and Mustafa, who also informed us that they're testing a marriage between Antrocomp and design thinking. Mustafa asked a question that I think you kind of answered actually, but maybe you can tell us more. So is there a self-assessment before the journey? And he also told us that he found it difficult to explain to the students the concept of value proposition. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your experience around that.
There is an assessment. It's the first lesson. We do this selfie. So it's a Dutch test. Because I have to use it. I am not allowed to do this test in English, unfortunately. But it's, as I said, it's quite comparable with the competences of Antrocomp. So it's something that we do at the beginning, and it's something that I did once, also at the end, to see if there was a difference or a progress in terms of the competences that we define being strong and being weak. But you know, the fact that I also asked them to reflect in their entrepreneurship portfolio. I have a questionnaire of some 10 questions, let's say, where they more or less have to do the same as the self-assessment. So, and I prefer having this reading material rather than just the graphics, you know. So that was one part of the question. The other question was about design thinking, was it? No, about the value proposition canvas.
Value proposition, yeah.
It's
The
true
concept.
that it depends on the phase that I'm working with. Like first year students in general, they have of course more difficulties to understand what this value proposition canvas is about. But that's, for example, that's what's one tool as an example where I know at the same time they're learning it in another course where the business techniques or the business fundamentals of running a business are put central, and where they actually learn the theory about the value proposition canvas. And so I tell them, did you ever heard about the value proposition canvas? Yes. So you're able to work with it? Yes, of course. And then I asked them to do it within the opportunity that they're developing for my course. And in general, well, they do their best, you know, to create something out of it. So, but it's true that those tools for first year students and even second year students are quite difficult to work with.
Thanks. I would really invite all of you to look in the chat, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of sharing of information while we continue the question. Serge was asking, does the school use this approach for itself? As in, is the school entrepreneurial, or is it entrepreneurship confined within your course? How would it be received, an entrepreneurial idea to change teaching methods, grading, and organization of the curriculum? Said otherwise, can entrepreneurship be confined to a course, or should it be transversal to the institution itself?
Well, from my point of view, I believe that it's the last one. It should become transversal, of course, but it depends on what the politics and the vision of management and first of all, are doing, and I think it's even the most important. I'm quite sure that if you don't feel supported from your management, where they really have to express, yes, we want to become an entrepreneurial university college, as a matter of speaking, don't start with it. But I'm lucky at this moment, because since 1 year, we have a new general manager, and he's like 1000% pro entrepreneurship and innovation. So this probably will end, I think, one day in entrepreneurship or as being something transversal, which also not only connects to what students learn, but also to what teachers and even researchers do in their daily practice, to become as an entity, as a totality, more entrepreneurial than it's now. But again, it's a good thing, and it's fundamental to have your management supporting you. But at the same time, I have 2,000 colleagues, you know, and it's a big company, let's say, and it takes time to change these things. But it's going in the good direction, absolutely. That was one part of the question. I think I forgot what the other part was.
I think, well, maybe Serge, did that answer your question? I mean, feel free to unmute yourself first for a minute. Did that encompass all of your question?
No, I think, thank you, Philippe. That was absolutely brilliant. I like very much the idea of combining the three elements that makes entrepreneurship, and not just looking at competencies by competencies independently from each other. So I think it is a critical element from people should retain from your presentation. My question is, were there any suggestions, entrepreneurial suggestion to change, you know, the grading in schools, the curriculum, and the way the teaching is being done? Or has it to be always external to the life of the school?
If I understand your question right, so you're talking about an alternative way of expressing like grades and evaluation. That's it, huh? Instead of how it is now. Okay. No, actually, I think it's a very good suggestion to see the added value of expressing differently the way how students behaved and learned and developed competences that have to do with being entrepreneurial. It's like very good idea, I think, because it's true at this moment, at the end of the track, I give them a score like on 20, very classical, very, very, very classical. So I think it would motivate and engage young people differently, to see if we could think of a way to tell something different than just like a normative score. So actually, that's a very good suggestion, and it's something I will take with me. Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant.
So your question doesn't have an answer, but more like a new idea. So that's okay.
That's brilliant. That's the idea. I mean, that's also why we do these webinars. Hazel had a question. Have you tried these approaches with colleagues for quality assurance of the university to continuously improve?
Well, let's say that I'm doing this via a bypass, because at this moment, to briefly describe for all of you, in Flanders, for the situation of higher education, universities and university colleges, we are lucky to be invited regularly within a forum. It's a forum for entrepreneurial higher education. And that at this moment, that is the place where we discuss about quality assessments and to see that what we're doing is actually the good thing, etc., etc. And why we're doing it is via this bypass, because that has to do with the specific situation of higher education in Flanders, which is very territorial because of a lot of historical reasons. And it's like a little miracle that we are still able to see each other within this forum, because it is facilitated not by higher education partner, but by another partner comparable with SPW, for example. But it's called the Flemish Agency for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and it's an administration in just below the ministry cabinets, who have this task of making also higher education more entrepreneurial. And that is a good thing, because if we have to do it amongst us, there's too much competition and too much things, etc., etc. So we wouldn't make any progress at all. And that is actually at this moment the place where we are discussing this, and actually via that bypass, putting pressure on all the managements to actually do something about also the recognition, for example, of entrepreneurial competences, also prior entrepreneurial competences. And via that way, step by step, we are now also for Thomas More entering and starting to discuss with our colleagues from the pedagogists, etc., and the real experts in pedagogy, to see that what we're doing is actually the good thing. At the same time, there's also more and more scientific research that starts to being developed in Flanders, also from out of that forum of colleagues doing PhDs, specifically looking for the impact, the effectiveness, the impact, the way to create working entrepreneurial learning tracks via design science, for example. There's a colleague from Ghent doing this. How can you see entrepreneurship education as a design problem, another research problem, or not only a research problem? So it's going on. So it's like, let's say that the coalition of people willing to make this work is growing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Maybe I will, because you touched upon the Flemish case, and we have very little time left, but maybe I had a question around, could you give us a little bit of background around what Flanders and VLAIO, the agency, has done with Entrecomp? What's this, policy aspect of it?
I think for everybody from the Entrecomp community, well, specifically from my point of view, I'm happy, because I think that Entrecomp is going to be the reference framework for the management and the assessment of entrepreneurial competences in Flanders. Because I understood from my colleagues with VLAIO, this Agency for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, that at this moment they're writing a lot of policy letters and policy recommendations, etc., etc. Towards the different ministries and cabinets, pleading that use Entrecomp as the reference framework, and that is a good thing, because, but I think it is because everybody understands it's great to use Entrecomp. It's easy to use, you know, it's comprehensible, it's integral. That is a very good thing that it has, for example, these progression levels. And I think, yeah, for every learner in any kind of learning contexts, you can find somewhere in those 465 learning outcomes that Entrecomp has described, you will definitely find the good descriptions and competences and descriptions of learning outcomes. So it's very how do you say that? Yeah, it's a good tool. I mean, it's a good tool, and of course, things can only become better, and also Entrecomp needs improvement and progress. And I think, for example, I hope that people within scientific research can also add their insights and their science outcomes to see that perhaps in terms of valuing ideas, for example, it's perhaps better to make tracks differently because we saw that using this or that tool could be better. For example, I saw a colleague from Ghent also who did a PhD around the effect of hackathons as an instrument. A hackathon, which is a very condensed way of generating ideas, not only, but also think about the concepts. And he saw a clear reason that hackathons have a kind of improvement in the how to say, the willingness of, and it's incredible, of women to become an entrepreneur or not, and specifically women. It's a very, very remarkable effect of his study. So that's a good thing that scientific research also connects with the ongoing practice that we're doing in order to make all our work better, to do progress in that terms. Yeah.
Thanks, and I would invite everyone to have a look at the Entrecomp into Action document, where we have a case study around Flanders and Vlaio, and you can dig deeper. And I think after the summer we might do a webinar, an event around you know, policy approaches towards Entrecomp, and we could dig deeper because it's a very interesting topic. But if you are interested, look into Entrecomp into Action. We'll drop the link here in the chat.